El Rancho de las Golondrinas is a living museum located 15 miles south of downtown Santa Fe. Their brochure describes them as such. El Rancho de las Golondrinas, the Ranch of the Swallows, was founded 300 years ago as a parrilla, stopping place on El Camino Real, the royal road to Mexico City. Today it is a one-of-a-kind destination where the past comes to life and weekend programs are fun for the whole family. They go on to say, the mission of El Rancho de las Golondrinas is to inspire learning and preserve the legacy of the land through encounters with the traditions and culture of New Mexico's Hispano past. Being a Mohawk visitor on territory explained to me to be Pueblo Nation peoples or Tewa territory, I set out to inquire further about the history of events on these lands and also to get a consensus as to whose territorial lands I am fortunate to be hosted on. Interesting note, all the cultural interpreters inside the replicated Spanish ranch are in fact from a variety of regions throughout the U.S., and none of which are Spanish people themselves, who have clearly been given a script to memorize and from which the narrative of the savage native is printed in bolded capitals. Did I learn things about the rich history of these lands? I sure did. Did I take the carefully penned script-driven information with a grain of salt? I did. So in the spirit of allowing the listener to come to your own conclusions, I offer up these conversational interviews gathered on site at El Rancho de las Golondrinas. I'm okay. That happens a lot, I bet. Yeah. Ouchie. But I wanted to come over and ask a question.
Yeah.
And I don't know if people often ask this question. So if this is an adobe structure?
This is, an adobe structure.
And it, from which era?
From around the 1500s. It's supposed to represent. This is all rebuilt.
Right. I get it.
They found some foundation and reconstructed to show what it would have been like.
Right.
And there would have been about 20 to 30 family members living in this.
Okay.
And that's the oldest building. That used to be a barn.
Okay.
Up until the early 1970s, when the owners decided to make it into a museum like this.
And so who would live here originally?
A family.
But from where?
It would have been a Hispanic family that would have come up from Mexico, but they could have come from Spain via Mexico up along the...
Okay. And then who's like original territory in terms of like native people?
Well, here were a lot of different Indians living around, and that's why they built it like a fort. And that's the lookout tower up there. So some of the younger boys would have been up there keeping a lookout.
Right.
So that if Indians came, they could, holler and get everybody in, and that's how they then closed the gates on each side.
So they would, like the native people would come because why?
Well, they would have come to steal from the Hispanic, but then the Hispanic went and stole from the Indians.
Right.
And so that's why this next room behind your back here is called the Captiva room. They might have kept pictured an Indian girl who would have sat there weaving on the loom, but she was really just like part of the family. And the Indians came and raided the Hispanic, and
So who would you say was here first, Native people or
Oh,
Spanish?
of course, the native.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, no, the native. The Hispanic.
But do you know which Native nation?
There was. Who were they now? Can't remember now what I heard. Which tribe was. But there were many. Not Apache, but it was another sort of pretty rough group. And then, of course, the Navajos, the Zuni. I mean, then we have all our Pueblos here, too. But the Pueblo people, they didn't go around as much stealing. They were more peaceful.
Because they had their own land?
Yeah, well, their own places.
Their own places, too.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, okay. And where are you from?
I'm originally from Finland.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
But it was the Spanish king who decided to send, ships across to Mexico, and they came up thinking that they would find gold here.
Oh.
But there were no gold mines here. No.
Yeah.
And so the Spanish king let the people have the churro sheep with them, mostly for fresh meat.
Eating on the ship, yeah.
And also for the track. I mean, it took them sometimes, 4 to 6 months to walk up from Mexico to here along the Rio Grande. So that's why the churro sheep is a good eating sheep, but does not have the best wool. But it happened to be the best breed for the climate and the area here.
Right. Wow. Do they ever have Native people do what you do? Like Spanish people come and stay here to interpret?
No, no, because they have all their own. This is supposed to be the Hispanic part of the first Hispanic people. So this is supposedly the oldest part, like from 1500s.
Oh, wow.
And when you walk through the gates and go to the Baca house, that's 1600s.
Oh, yeah. Do you know what Baca means?
Baca was a family.
Oh, okay.
And they call it Baca because that was actually a family with the name Baca that lived in that house.
Because I know in downtown they have a street called Baca.
Yeah,
Baca
but there was a lot of that family.
Okay, yeah, no, I thank you for answering. I'm from the Mohawk Nation, and so to come here, I am also interested to know, of course, whose territory am I visiting? Traditional territory, original territory, and just to see how people talk about the history.
Well, the Indians, they were weaving with cotton when the Hispanic came. So it was the Hispanic that brought the sheep with them. And of course, the Indians then, either traded or stole the sheep. And that's how the Navajo weavers became so famous from getting the sheep.
Did they grow cotton, or that comes from the trees?
They were growing cotton. They had probably gotten seeds from Mexico.
Oh, okay.
And here, the trade items here at this ranch was the dyes.
Okay.
The blue indigo and the red cochineal. You can't get here in New Mexico, so they had to trade for that.
I see.
But then here was no metal, so they also had to trade if they needed a pot. So that's why at the ranch here, it was very important to have the sheep because they could trade with their rugs or their actual
for things
wool.
they need. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, I'm going to move on. Thank
Yeah,
you.
you're welcome.
Keep cool. Thank
You
you.
live here?
I am staying here. I'm the artist in residence over at Sunrise Springs.
Oh, you are?
Yep, so I'm staying here for...
I read about you
Oh yeah,
in the
until
paper.
end of August.
Yeah.
I'm here.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I don't
What
keep
was
bumping
the
my head.
art?
Writing.
Writing.
So I'm a poet.
Oh.
Yeah, from Canada.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's lovely. I've never been here. I walked over.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's hot, but I walked over. It was
Oh,
nice.
you did?
Yes. Thanks so much again. What is your name? Inger. Inger, thank you.
So they can bring things in, and that's why they were they had more luxury than what they had here.
Right.
So I thought that was interesting. I'm looking at this place going, "Are you kidding me?" That because I work, helping here, and I did dawn on me why. That's so interesting.
Yes, it is.
So life was remote out in this area.
Yeah.
They were forgot about.
So beautiful. Beautiful.
Ready to go?
Pretty cool. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you for coming. Appreciate it. I was telling those folks that basically that you're now really entered into the 1700s. This building is the oldest building on the ranch that we're in. It dates back to about 1758. We don't know what it originally was for sure in the 1700s. We know the records are showing as a dwelling, but it's not clear enough to let us know exactly what it was. When the founders of the museum, Mr. and Mrs. Palomino, had it before it became a church, it was a barn, and so they converted it in the 70s as they built on ruins the placitas. They turned this into a church, which would have been realistic to a placitas in the 1700s. So basically, the screen and is actually the patron saint would have been San Isidro. Well, San Isidro was a farmer in Spain, and he worked for a
Can I just interrupt?
Sure.
Comanches and Ute
From here?
were the ones who would have raided around here.
Oh, rated. So when you say the place was built on ruins, what ruins?
They were the Hispanics.
Hispanic ruins.
Hispanic, yeah.
But what we don't know,
Thank you. Inger.
what we don't know, like if you look at this building here, which is 1700s, it's original. These buildings, the walls are rock, which is kind of which would have been natural, but they know that the Native Americans inhabited the area, so they're not sure that maybe that when the first colonists came in the 1500s, that they might have just basically inhabited. We don't know, but they might have inhabited some old Native American ruins. Might have been the beginning. Where our story begins is the 1700s, because after
Ours being who?
I'm sorry?
Our story.
Well, our story of the ranch is very solid.
Of the ranch.
Starting 1750s.
Okay.
There was a ranch here in the Spanish records, El Rancho Los Golondrinas. And so that's why we start the story of the ranch
In the 1700s.
Exactly.
Right.
But they know, and we're starting now to research beyond the 1700s.
Right. I know it can be challenging because not a lot of that history was written
Yes.
or recorded, and one has to rely on the original inhabitants
Right.
in the oral tradition that could have possibly been saved.
What is interesting is obviously that a placita most likely might have had a torreon, which is that tower out there. And so a torreon, obviously, they had, like you mentioned a while ago, that the Comanches continuously raided these. There's stories like even
Right. But the Comanches would have come from where, though?
They were just in the area and they were upset. And
So
why?
so it's their area.
Yes, let me explain why though.
Okay.
Because irrigation, which the Spanish brought, which comes from the Moors, that basically land was very limited. There was tons of land, yes, but there wasn't tons of agriculture land because the Native Americans were using the Rio Grande or whatever, and it was very limited. But when the Spaniards came, they changed the ballgame a little bit because they started building acequias and they were able to spread it out. But even the Native Americans were fighting among themselves because actual useful agricultural land was very limited. Like, oh my gosh, where are these guys coming from? And that upset them deeply. Plus, the Spanish were bringing things that had never been seen before: horses,
metal,
and sheep. And exactly. And so, look, today, the wool is used a lot by Native Americans, and horses were unheard of. So they were not only attacking these Placituses because to get rid of them, also they were attacking to gain, like you said, the resources. And so that's what's interesting. And Albuquerque was a small community, but there's a community. Albuquerque was made up, I think, of 4 actual communities. One of it is Los Gallegos, and that was a Placitas just like this. This would be a replica of probably what Los Gallegos was at the time. Tomane, same thing down Las Lunas, very similar. So that's what it is. Well, what's interesting is, talking about history, this Torreon is a replica. Several years ago, they were doing some excavating, and they go, wow, we have a real Torreon, which is out here. They went back, started checking the archives. It's listed. It talks about it. Where the Sandoval boys were killed by Comanche raid, July of 1776. So, like, wow. And it's just the true rally. So the ranch is getting ready to spend a ton of bucks. They're getting ready to do more excavating.
Oh, yeah.
And so we can do more, like with the Torreon.
Right. And that will prove history beyond the
Exactly.
1750s. Huh, that's so interesting. It's like, and then who would have recorded that excavation? Or that history of the finds here?
Well, that's actually, it's in today in the Santa Fe archives, which has the contents. That's not true. It's 2 places. There are also, some of it is in the Santa Fe archives, but some of it is in Mexico City. And there's, I don't know where, but there's archives there that our researchers go to. They actually go to Mexico City and they go to some of the
Why would they have been filed there, I wonder?
Because that, if you go back in history, this was New Spain. And so Mexico City was very important. And actually all trade went through Mexico City. So that's a 6-month ride from here. And so everything that came to El Rancho Los Golondrinas or Santa Fe came from Mexico City. That was the major area. And that's why. So that's understandably why the records are there too.
How far away is that from here?
Today I don't know the mileage, but in the 1700s it's a 6-month trip.
6 months.
So if for instance, when I'm in the Cebo, I tell people that I'm actually a lot of times the dom of the ranch, so I order chocolate. So if I would order chocolate today, I would get it in a year from now.
I see.
Because it takes 6 months for them to go to place to get it,
and
6 months to get back.
Right.
So that's interesting.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
No worries.
Thanks.
Hi. Hello. You guys, I was telling this young lady that you're in a church. Excuse me, this is incorrect. You're in a building that really existed in 1758. This was not a church at the time. It was some type of dwelling, and later a barn. But it dates back to 1758. So it's the oldest building on the ranch, probably one of the oldest buildings in New Mexico. Next door, the Baca House dates to 1826, which is old in its own right, but that's of a different era. And that's why this Placitas is a fort. And Placitas says in New Mexico, it was not uncommon to have a church, which belonged to the family. And there was many guests, when they were coming to Real, that came to visit.
Actually, he probably doesn't, but the landlord and or grandma, put her up there because it'll be warm. We've boarded over the actual fireplace, but it was there behind that one pot of stick. Yeah. And then you would scrape out holes that you needed to stick your other hole.
Raiders of the Spanish?
No, raiders of the tribes that had were already here. Navajo are relatively recent.
What tribes were here originally?
Most of them are gone, but the Puebloans, who are descendants of the Anasazi, had a
Oh, thank you.
the Puebloans and the Hopi are descendants of the Anasazi.
Anasazi.
The old ones, that's what it means.
Okay. Huh, I wonder where the Anasazi are originally from.
Probably over the Bering Strait.
The Bering Strait into Berezina?
No, they came from Siberia across the Bering Strait and on down. And then as they spread out, they became different tribes. Different family groups eventually became tribes.
That's a theory. Some people, I mean, it is a theory. It hasn't been proven.
Oh, yeah.
And I know a lot of the other story to that would be coming up from the south.
I had heard that they came across on rafts.
Right.
And I had heard that. In fact, that was one of the early things that they did after Kon-Tiki. And it's because they were tracing the mother's DNA, and that was how they came up with that particular variation on it. It's possible that it came from both directions. Now, I'm going to say that the Navajo came across the north because I've had Koreans say that Navajo sounds almost understandable and vice versa, especially a lot of the gutturals and the glottal stops. So that to me is a strong indicator that they at least came that direction. But they were warlike at the time, which is why I find it so funny that they've got the blessing way and the healing sings and so on. You can go out and kill a whole bunch of people, but then come back and get yourself cleansed.
That's the American way, isn't it? That's the American way. The early beginnings.
There you go.
There you go. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks.
Said that after about 6 months. It's the best. Yeah, it's the best material. Hi, where are you visiting
Hi,
from?
Canada.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, my original territory, which is now known as Canada. Where are you from?
Originally from Virginia. I've been out here since 1977, so I'm pretty much a native. I was just talking to them about the history of this area here and the history of the Southwest that a lot of people don't realize that both sides, the Comanches, the Utes, the Navajos were raiding the Spanish settlements looking for livestock, children, and women of childbearing age. The Spanish were going out into particularly Navajo country. They worked the Navajos hard. They were looking for the same thing, and that's why even though a lot of the native New Mexicans who consider themselves Spanish, like my wife, 26% DNA Native American.
How did you come to that number?
That was when she was tested through Ancestry.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, it came up.
Who looks after that? Who do you send your DNA test to?
Well, there are different services. There's Ancestry, there's Family Tree, and there's one other one that's real big. The thing is, there's a big controversy now because the privacy issues, they're starting to use those law enforcement to go after other people. And, that wasn't what they were built for to begin with, and so there are privacy issues. But it's interesting because it's been a real, like when I did my wife's family history, I knew that she had maternal ancestors from Zuni Pueblo. And so when I told her mom, who considered herself pure Spanish, and I said, you have ancestors from Zuni Pueblo. She says, no, I don't. And I said, well, okay, I'll leave it at that. But then when my wife, she knew better, and so when she wasn't at all surprised when she got her DNA back that was the highest individual. But that's a real melting pot here because you had the Native American DNA, the Spanish.
Which nation? What tribe in particular?
The Pueblos here more than anything else. But they also, a number of the Hispanic males who came up from Mexico here brought wives with them from Mexico who were indigenous in Mexico. The other thing you have here that's different from a lot of places is a lot of the Spanish settlers here were crypto-Jews, were people who had been driven out of Spain by the Inquisition. They were forced to either convert to Catholicism or die. And so they became Catholic, but they were still practicing their Judaism in secret. So if somebody that has a long history in northern New Mexico does their DNA, they're going to have Sephardic Jew, Native American, North African because of the Moors in Spain, and usually some sub-Saharan African. And so it's like I always say everybody's related to everybody ultimately, and you gotta understand that. And that's one of the, sometimes I feel like I want to apologize to any visitors from another country for what's going on here right now, because I think most American people realize we're a melting pot, and this whole thing of shutting people out is
melting pot after settlers, though.
Oh, but that's right.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's there's a great, I don't know if you're familiar with him, there's a great Native American artist here from Santo Domingo, Pueblo, named Ricardo Cate, who he does a cartoon for the New Mexican. It's syndicated in other papers. It's called No Reservations. And so a single frame cartoon. And he has some of the best insights into this whole thing of, about immigration. He's saying, wait a minute, everybody was immigrants
That's
here.
That's right. Yeah. Oh, that's good. I'm glad you.
Yeah, if you've never seen Ricardo Cate,
I think I may have, and he puts like hats on his characters.
yeah, he has like a guy who looks like Custer and the chief.
That's right.
And like they have this dialogue going back and forth, and only the chief always wins.
Right.
Yeah.
Because of who's authoring the story.
That's it.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Watch your head go.
I will do. I already got it one lump from my visit here. Oh, look at that skin. Wow.
So this is a family room.
This is a family room. For Spanish family.
Well, the whole place was occupied by a Spanish family, an extended Spanish family.
Right. What do you mean by that, like extended?
Well, it was parents, children, grandparents, aunts, uncles, nieces, etc., which took up most of the people here. But they also had a certain amount of servants who cooked.
Who would the servants be, do you think?
What?
Who do you think the servants would be?
The servants were probably poor Mexican people, poor people who were up here. Plus, they might have had a certain amount of. I don't think they had a lot of Indian servants, but they did raid Indian villages. It was back and forth. And if they would raid a pueblo, they would bring children back. Usually children who became slaves.
Right. It was like human trafficking almost.
Well, yes.
Human trade.
Yeah. But for supposedly an altruistic reason.
Being
they wanted to convert them to Catholicism, which would guarantee that they would go to heaven when they died. Because otherwise, if they remained infidels, they'd go to hell.
so
They thought there was a good reason
and
for it.
that justifies the means,
Yeah.
so to speak. Yeah.
Unfortunately, this happened in other countries also, like in Australia, etc.
Oh, Canada, all kinds of places close by. Where are you from originally?
The New York, Connecticut area.
Oh yeah. And how long you been in?
Santa Fe?
Yeah.
About 5 years.
Whose traditional territory do you know this to be? Originally.
Originally?
Yeah.
It was probably Native American.
I wonder what nation though. I wonder what
Well,
tribe.
I think the nations that lived here were the Pueblo people.
Because when in Canada, what has kind of grown in popularity, and even when I go places outside of my own territory, we give land acknowledgement. And so, for example, I'm Mohawk, from Southern Ontario, but we came up from what is now New York, what is now Manhattan. That was our original territory. But I've been living on the West Coast for 24 years, and so when I do, and I'm a poet, so when I do readings, I do a land acknowledgement. I'll say, I want to acknowledge and give thanks to the original people, Coast Salish people whose territory I've been a visitor for, 10, 25 years. So if I was to do that here, I'm wondering, who do I acknowledge?
I think you acknowledge the Pueblo
The
people.
Pueblo people.
I mean, there were other tribes, but
Yeah, would you say?
but not living here.
But is Pueblo like a general
Yeah.
term?
No, actually not. It is a
nation.
specific nation.
It is a Pueblo nation.
Nation.
Okay.
I don't know much. I'm from down south. My heritage is Mexica.
Okay.
So, but I kind of
You know what I mean? Like,
Mexica,
where is that?
Center Mexico.
Oh, okay.
Mexico City.
Oh, okay. Oh.
After they were called Aztecs.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So originally we were called many names.
Okay.
When we came from up north, down south, we're very close related, though nobody talks much about it. All the nations down in Mexico are related to all the nations up here.
Okay. I got it.
No, not many people talk about it.
Right.
And I don't know much. I barely got here 5 years ago, so I'm kind of learning.
Okay, yeah. I'm trying to learn, yeah, from here too, because I'm the artist in residence over at the Sunrise Springs. And so, of course, I want to be in this space. I'm here until the end of August. I want to be in this space in a conscious way, like be aware of the territory and the people. And not just learn, post-settler history, but beyond. Like I'm trying to find that beyond kind of information. But this is an interesting place. I mean, it's gorgeous.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
We've been having attending the festival like for 5 years.
Oh, really?
Every time I come here, I get amazed.
Oh, nice. Oh, nice.
Wonderful
Good.
place.
Yeah. It's good. Yeah. It's fantastic.
Them guys are awesome.
Oh, yeah.
All
Good.
they do is amazing.
It is amazing. Yeah. Yeah, and I'm just down the road, so it's a different vibe over there.
Well, I've never been there.
Oh, you
but,
should come over.
Actually, we have a gift certificate for dinner there.
Yeah, you should go and just see. It's got lovely.
It's the springs are not there.
They have a pool and hot tubs. It's water features. It's lovely. It's got an energy, our energy over there. So you can go and hike around a bit. And
Have you been to Ojo Caliente?
I haven't not yet, but that's the sister property.
Right.
Yeah, so I haven't been up yet.
Hello. Welcome to the family room.
How was this room used? And what was
This was
its
probably
spirit?
the most important room in the house. This was the family room, and every room basically has a purpose, and everything was built around a central courtyard where most of the activities took place during the day. The cooking was taking place outdoors. There was a well. All of the making wool products were done out there, except at the winter time.
Warlike savages, raiders, pillagers, weavers, innocent Spanish travelers, crypto Jews, quote unquote families, human trafficking, all explained by second and third generation immigrant interpreters. El Rancho de las Golondrinas is an absolutely beautiful setting, and as far as I can tell, authentically replicated and constructed on the ruins of the original placita. So I guess my point is the vulnerability of truth inside interpretation. I do my best to stay open, and I do my best to stay aware. The victors get to write history, as they say, and one of the victors at El Rancho de las Golondrinas is Leonora Curtin, who purchased the ranch in 1932 and who also happens to be the founder of the infamous Santa Fe Indian Market. Music featured in this podcast is You and Me by Muetta. My name is Janet Rogers, Mohawk Tuscarora from Six Nations Territory, currently of no fixed address, doing back-to-back residencies throughout Turtle Island territories. Thanks for listening.